Hello sports fans, my name is Professor S and today we are talking history and we're talking economics. We're also going to take a page out of the Art Vandelay playbook, imports and exports. We're talking the Hawley-Smoot tariff and we're doing it on Hasty History. But before we get to Hawley and Smoot, let's talk tariffs. What are they? A tariff is basically a tax on imports and exports. So when I say that the Hawley-Smoot tariff raised tariffs on imports in the United States, you know that means that it raised taxes on the stuff being brought into the United States by other countries to be sold. So that means that other countries are having to pay more money to sell their stuff in the US. That makes those other countries mad. But before we get too much into the specifics, let's talk context. In 1929, the Great Depression hits and it makes everybody nervous. So what America wants to do is protect its workers from foreign competition. For example, the United States would much rather have a US worker make something in a factory rather than the US buying that same thing from another country, even if it's cheaper. Giving American money to other countries is not going to help stimulate the American economy. In economic terms, this is called protectionism. Willis Hawley and Reed Smoot were two politicians who figured that if the United States raised tariffs on imported goods, then that would give the American farmers and merchants a better shot at having competitive prices on their own American goods. These two guys introduced the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which was officially known as the Tariff Act of 1930. Now, the act passes both the House and the Senate because all of these politicians are trying to do right by the people that they represent and protect their workers. But the economists and the businessmen of the time, even people like Henry Ford, were pleading like crazy with President Herbert Hoover to veto the bill. Even President Hoover had concerns that raising tariffs and making it more expensive to import goods was going to make these other countries mad. And that was the last thing he wanted in the wake of World War I. Even so, eventually Hoover relents and he signs the bill. With the act passed and the tariffs raised, surprise, surprise, all the other countries get mad. All of a sudden, they're being told that if they want to sell their goods in the United States, they're going to have to pay an arm and a leg. Not only does this make the other countries mad to the point that they don't want to sell their goods in the United States anymore, it also makes them raise their own tariffs out of spite, so that if American importers and exporters want to sell their goods in other countries, now they have to pay an arm and a leg. At the end of the day, the Hawley-Smoot tariff did a lot more harm than good. See, it helped the US a little bit in the short term, but in a globalized economy, something that helped the US in the short term and hurt the rest of the world in the long term meant that the rest of the world in the short term wanted to see the US hurt in the long term. Because the other countries raised their tariffs in response to the US raising its tariffs, everybody's charging an arm and a leg in taxes. And this is smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression, when nobody can afford to be messing around like this. Finally, in 1932, Mr. Hawley and Mr. Smoot do not get reelected. But there is a guy running for President of the United States whose name is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he's running on the platform of lowering tariffs. So when FDR gets elected, he passes the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act of 1934, and this lowers tariffs across the board. This helps to bring all the countries back to the table to play nice, economically speaking. This has been the Hawley-Smoot tariff. This has been Hasty History. I have been Professor S, and you stay hasty, my friends.